Good morning, creative writers. Trem here with your lesson of the day for poetry. We're talking rhythm today. That's right. Keeping the beat. Boom, boom. Usually, if we were in the room together, I would start clapping. I would see if you could match my clap. The idea of rhythm is just this kind of steady cadence, this beat. We know it because we know music. We can find the rhythm in music, some of us better than others, which is why some of us, I think, can dance better than others. So, rhythm in poetry is just you recognizing beats and syllables and purposely using them. So we're going to talk about that today, and hopefully everything I share with you will get you excited to try one of the three common types of poetry that really use rhythm heavily. So let's go through this together. If you look at my screen here, you'll see that this is like an introductory sheet, and I've attached this to your Google Classroom for you so you can read it more slowly if you need to. But the basis of rhythm is syllables, and I'm sure you remember when you were in kindergarten or first grade and your teacher taught you how to count syllables up your arm, right? Like syllable, unicorn, those types of, any type of word, you're counting it on your arm. Or some people prefer to snap it or count their fingers or clap it out. As long as you know how to recognize that words are broken into syllables, it's just how we say them. There are natural beats in words, those are syllables, and you're going to need to know how to count those in order to do these poems that rely on rhythm. So that's just the basic. If you can understand that, you're good. A little bit more complex down here on the sheet, we talk about meter and foot. Now, if you were in an all-year poetry class, we would dive into this deeply. And for those of you taking AP Lit, you guys do dive into this pretty deeply. So if you don't understand what I'm about to say, don't stress too much. It's just an overview of some poets, how they use rhythm is very specific and a little bit tricky. So let me at least introduce you to it because you might understand it. So meter, this idea of meter, it refers to how the pattern of beats happens regularly in the poem. So if a poem follows a specific meter, it means there's a specific type of rhythm, a specific pattern that poet is following. And so it's meter because meter is like that Greek root that means measure, right? So it measures the number of syllables per line. So it also has to deal with, and this is where it can get a little bit tricky, meter deals with syllables that we call stressed, where you put the emphasis, right? You put more emphasis on a stressed syllable versus syllables that we call unstressed. A lot of words, even verbs that you add the ing to, like looking, you emphasize the verb part, look-ing. You don't say looking, right? If I walked by, and said, I've been looking at some really cool books, you would think something was wrong with me because I'd be emphasizing the wrong syllable in the word. So just naturally, we emphasize certain syllables over others. And it can be a little tricky to recognize that at first if you're not used to it. But this idea of patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables, when you have a specific pattern of that, it's called a foot. 1 foot of poetry is that pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. And then the line of poetry is made up of multiple feet. Again, you might not be following, and that's okay, but I'm at least trying to speak to those of you who are a little bit more advanced and do want to learn this type of poetry. So, the most common metrical feet in English poetry would be iambic or trochaic. Iambic is just the pattern where you have one unstressed syllable followed by one stressed syllable. And that is your pattern, that is your foot, one unstressed and one stressed. So right here is an example, and walked within word glory crowned, right? So the U is for unstressed, the dash is for stressed. And so that would be a line of iambic poetry right there. Now trochaic is the opposite. You stress first and then it's followed by the unstressed line. So this one, you stress the piping down the valleys wild, right? So there's just, it's not a ton different, but you can tell that there's emphasis, on those first syllables in each foot here. So that's just an introduction. Again, like I said, if this makes no sense to you, don't stress about it too much. Haha, stress. Let's see what I did there. But it's good to remember that this is something that poets do. And a line of poetry that follows the specific meter, it's called verse. If you've heard someone say, yeah, Shakespeare writes in verse, well, Shakespeare does write in verse because he writes, iambic pentameter most of the time. So this is just, an overview of, how many feet are in a line. So when you combine the type of foot it is with how many feet per line it is, that's how you get the verse. So for example, I just said Shakespeare writes in iambic, where is it here? Pentameter, right here, because he has 5 feet per line and each foot is 2 syllables. So that means his total number of syllables per line is 10. He has 5 feet, each foot is 2 syllables. Do the math. I'm not just an English teacher, but I'm decent at math, right? So that's your more complex kind of lesson in rhythm. I'm sorry if you were bored and you fast forwarded me, but coming back to reality, the most common poems that you're going to see that rely on rhythm are the following 3. You have your haiku. I'd be shocked if many of you haven't heard of this type of poetry. It is your very simple Japanese style of poetry that really relies on getting inspiration from nature, which is why I'm out here in my backyard giving you inspiration from nature. And it's just 3 lines of poetry. The first line has 5 syllables, second line has 7 syllables, the last line has 5 syllables. Really pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I've given you a lot of important tips that come from traditional Japanese haikus. So if you really want to dig in and write a traditional Japanese haiku, try to read these, look at these tips. Ideally, gain inspiration from something in nature and link it to something, emotional or in real life. Have it be kind of metaphorical and suggestive, right? Not overt, but suggestive, and try to stay in present tense. And just one tip I'll give you is, a few students tend to get messed up, and when they see this 575, they think that represents how many words in the line. Remember, it's not the number of words in the line, it's the number of syllables in the line, those beats in the line. And the other tip I'll give you is, remember that a line of poetry doesn't need to be a complete sentence, right? You can actually have all 3 lines, when read together, be a complete sentence. You're just using what's called enjambment, and you're pushing the thought onto the next line. So you can finish the idea on the next line. Some of you might know that already. If you didn't know that, just know that you have the freedom to sort of either just use fragments or push the thought, like the rest of that sentence, onto the next line. So if you're having trouble coming up with, oh no, I don't have a line that's only 5 syllables, maybe the rest of that idea comes on the next line where there's 7 syllables. So just know you have the freedom of enjambment to push your thought to the next line. So then moving on, these are some examples of haikus. If you need them, they're here for you. You can read them. Something that is similar to a haiku but a little bit more complex is called a renga. And a renga is also, from Japan. They just actually take the haiku form and add to it. So a traditional renga has, the 575 in those first 3 lines, but each stanza actually has 2 more lines that both contain 7 syllables. So essentially it goes 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. And you can have as many stanzas in a renga as you want. Traditionally, rengas are longer, and they do have multiple stanzas, at least 2, sometimes 5 to 6 to 7 stanzas. And traditionally, they're actually written in collaboration with another poet. So if you really want to, if we were in class, I would have you, write the first 3 lines and then swap papers with somebody sitting next to you. But since we're not, if you know somebody in class and you guys want to collaborate on a renga and you want to write the first 3 lines, have them write the next 2, and then keep that pattern going, I certainly welcome that. That might be a fun way to do this assignment. So you can do that, or you can write a renga on your own if you want to try. So looking at our very last option for popular poetry formats that follow rhythm, I mentioned Shakespeare earlier. He is our most famous sonnet writer ever. And so if you really want to challenge yourself with rhythm, I recommend that you attempt a Shakespearean sonnet. Yay! So the rules are here, and I'll try not to bore you with them, but I'll try to at least explain them. They are written in iambic pentameter, and they do follow a rhyme scheme. So you're kind of blending, you're blending what we've done with rhyme with what we're doing with rhythm. So if you really liked rhyming and you really like rhyme schemes, then definitely tackle this. So it's that iambic, unstressed, stressed pattern of bah boom, bah boom, bah boom, right? It's almost like the heartbeat. And linguists have actually said that iambic is naturally how, English speakers talk. So if you're finding it overwhelming to say, oh, how am I ever going to know if I'm following a pattern of unstressed, stressed? Don't worry too much. Just maybe write the way you naturally would speak, and you might fall into it. You may have to rearrange a couple of words, but it should be okay. And you might also notice with these examples, a lot of our articles or our smaller words, the, that, do, those are often our unstressed words. They're not what we're putting our emphasis on, putting our focus on. So if you get a little stuck, you can always try to use those articles, use those smaller words to fill in so that you have an unstressed syllable. These are all examples from Shakespearean sonnets. You can certainly read them, but you'll notice that they all do follow an unstressed, stressed pattern all the way through. And this is a complete sonnet here. And what I want you to notice is the rhyme scheme, right? Every other line is going to rhyme. It has an A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then G, G rhyme scheme. So at the very end, your last two lines, that's called a couplet. Right? A couplet has the same number of beats per line and they rhyme. So that is a rhyming couplet at the end for a total of 14 lines. Sonnets are always 14 lines. So again, if you're going to try a sonnet, you have a lot to think about. Every single line has to be 10 syllables, right? You're following a pattern of unstressed, stressed syllables, and then you are rhyming. You have your end rhyme here for your rhyme scheme in this pattern. So that's a big challenge if you're up for it. Even if you're not sure, you can always try it. I mean, worst case scenario, you don't worry too much about which syllables are stressed and unstressed, and at least you try doing 10 syllables per line and trying the rhyme scheme. That's at least a step in the right direction. I would definitely recommend it. And like I did for our last assignment, I'm giving you templates to work with. So on these templates, just pick one. If you're really overwhelmed by everything and you want to keep it simple, try writing a simple haiku. They're kind of fun, not that hard. You can certainly do more than one if you want, but I've given you the setup here for a 5-7-5 beautiful haiku. Similarly, you could write a renga. I have just kept it really simple here with just the one. Actually, I'll go back and make sure I have two on here before I post it. You should have at least 2 stanzas if you're doing a renga, so I'll put another one on here to have 2 stanzas if you want to try a renga. And then for the brave, the bold, you guys, if you want to, can try this sonnet. I've just put the syllables on here, the rhyme scheme on here, and reminded you that every line has to have 10 syllables following this specific pattern. So that is your activity for today, is to play with rhythm in poetry with one of these 3 templates, or all if you're super excited about it. As I mentioned up here, if you're feeling a little bit unsure about what to write about, remember the writing process is really important. So take a minute, do some free writing, do some word association, right? If you want to try a haiku or a renga and you're trying to be inspired by nature, look around your yard, look around, outside. What do you notice? What are you seeing? What does it remind you of, right? Maybe there are clouds in the sky that you can gain inspiration from, or even like I have wind chimes behind me that, the wind is blowing, so maybe the power of the wind. So just kind of give yourself time to think about a topic. You do some free writing, maybe turn even to your journal, and then use that idea to then turn it into a poem. It's a little bit easier sometimes than just drafting from scratch. So I hope that this has been helpful. I miss you all a ton, and just remember to reach out to me if you need anything at all. I am here for you. So I look forward to reading your rhythm poems soon. Bye.